years ago, we couldn't find anyone to play the piano. So I feel very rich. We're going to have a story for all ages, but I think we're going to let that go since the kids are gone, and it was to be for adults, but I think we better go on with our service. So Reverend Hunter Leggitt are you here? There you are, Hunter. So please come forward, and if you would, bring us your offering for today.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Let's see. You know, we live in such a time when our entire lives, when racial and ethnic and so on issues have been at the forefront. And many, many changes have come about for the good. Many of them by way of dramatic events like, well, the Civil War. This is my great-grandfather with two of his companions in arms at a Michigan Grand Army of the Republic meeting about 1910. I also had grandfathers fighting for the South, fighting to keep their slaves. You know, these dramatic things, the marches on Washington, marches on Selma and so forth, have a tremendous impact. But my message today is, let's keep sight of the little things that happen that aren't marches, that aren't dramatic, that ordinary people can do just in the course of life when issues come up and they have an opportunity to do something to make a little bit of a change. So I was born in Marshall, Michigan, right down the road. They called it proudly, they called it the home of the Underground Railroad. The only Black person who lived in Marshall worked for my dad and lived in our spare room. He rocked my cradle with his foot. My dad was from Georgia. When we were going to go there on vacation one year, Tobe, that was his name, Tobe needed somewhere to eat while we were gone because he usually ate with us. So my father went downtown and went from door to door of the local restaurants and said, you know, Bill, you know, my employee Tobe, well, we're going to be gone. He needs a place to eat while we're gone, and I can pay you in advance for his meals. And one after the other, shaking their heads. Well, you know, Sam, we can't do that. Here in Marshall, Michigan, we can't do that. So finally, when he went back a second time, the owner of one restaurant said, well, if he'll come to the back door, we can hand him out some food. Okay. Then we moved to San Marcos, Texas, when I was 13. And the schools were totally segregated with regard to Black kids. And for Mexican kids, segregated up to high school. Most Black people and Mexicans lived on dirt streets without houses in the town of the beautiful mansions lining Belvin Avenue. My point is that even with all the negatives, there are things people can do. Our high school had a tradition that each year there would be a senior party hosted by one student's parents. And formal invitations were engraved and sent out based on an address list furnished by the school. Now, my mother received the list. It was her turn. She looked at the list, and with her jaw set and her most purposeful walk, she stormed into the school, straight to the principal's office. Mr. Yarborough, is this the list? Well, yes, Mildred. Where's Patsy Mendoza? Where's Ponty Moreno? Where's Jesus Garcia? And a number of other names. And so on. Mr. Yarborough leaned forward, as she described it, and said, "Don't worry, Mildred, they understand." And he must have cowered behind his desk as she announced, "Well, Yancey," that was his name, Yancey. "Well, Yancey, they may understand, but I don't. Either I get the whole list of the seniors or there's no party." She got the list. There was a party. Patsy and Ponty and Jesus all came, and that ugly chapter of San Marcos high school history was over. I have one more little story of someone making a difference. So my dad was from Georgia, as I said. And in the 1960s, integration was beginning to take place to some extent in Georgia schools. And my Aunt Louise taught high school science in a little town called McDonough. And she was mighty vain about her teaching abilities. And in fact, she was famous for the number of students that went through her science courses that went on to medical school and became doctors, including her own son, my cousin Ted. So the small southern town was taking a stab at token integration. And Aunt Louise swore loudly that the minute one of them walked into her school, she would resign. Well, they did, and she didn't. And after a while, according to her son, her vanity as a teacher won out. And she would say, "You know, some of them are pretty smart." And, but of course, they've never had a teacher like me, which sadly enough was probably true. They hadn't had a teacher like me. So years later, my cousin, Dr. Copeland, by then a famous surgeon, was lecturing to a medical audience at his alma mater. So after the lecture, people were coming forward to exchange a few words. And among them was a fairly young Black woman in a white coat with a stethoscope, and she waited patiently. When she finally got to Ted, she introduced herself, exchanged some pleasantries, and then said, "Dr. Copeland, I once had a school teacher named Louise Copeland who changed the course of my life." "Well, that would be my mother," Ted said. "So where are you practicing?" She said, "I'm on the faculty here teaching surgery." And he called it the full circle.